Windows 1.0. It all started on November 20th, 1985, when Microsoft unleashed Windows 1.0 on the world. It wasn't even a real operating system. Instead of being a standalone OS, Windows 1.0 was a graphical shell that ran on top of MS-DOS. You know that black screen with the blinking cursor where you had to type commands just to open a program? Microsoft created Windows to make computers easier to use. You could finally click icons instead of memorizing command prompts. Revolutionary at the time, but in reality, it was like putting a colorful sticker on a calculator. The programs were simple: Paint, Calculator, Notepad, Calendar, Clock, and a game called Reversi. The interface was locked in tile mode. No overlapping windows, no minimize or maximize button. Every window had to sit side by side, like tiles on a bathroom floor. It had problems: blue screens, weird letters, strange sounds. It crashed often, and there was another problem. You needed a mouse to use it. But mice weren't common yet. Most people only had keyboards. So even though Windows 1.0 was supposed to make things easier, a lot of people couldn't even use it, and the ones who could weren't impressed. Windows 2.0. 2 years later, in 1987, Microsoft released Windows 2.0. This time, things actually started looking up. For the first time, Windows could overlap. You could put one on top of another. It sounds so simple today, but back then, it was a big deal. People could finally multitask. Microsoft Word and Excel both made their debuts here. Office workers could now type in Word while checking numbers in Excel, with both windows overlapping on the same screen. That was a game changer for productivity. But then Apple stepped in. They sued Microsoft. They claimed that overlapping windows copied the Macintosh interface. And honestly, they had a point. It looked similar. But here's where it gets interesting. Microsoft won the case because Apple had actually hired Microsoft to make Word and Excel for Macintosh computers back in the early 80s. Since they worked so closely together, Microsoft was allowed to use some of Apple's interface ideas for Windows. Apple only got upset later when Windows started becoming more successful. The judge ruled in Microsoft's favor. That's why we can overlap Windows to this day. Microsoft also released a variant called Windows/386 that ran in protected mode, allowing multiple DOS programs to run at once. It was the first version that required a hard drive. Before this, people were still running Windows off floppy disks. Windows 3.0. This became the first version of Windows that actually made sense to people. The graphical interface looked clean and colorful. It was miles ahead of the previous versions. Computers were now using the Intel 386 processor, which was powerful enough to handle something called protected mode. That meant Windows could run heavier programs and multitask more seamlessly. For the first time, the interface was built around icons and folders. You could point and click. It felt like the future. People started switching. CD-ROM support came along, sound playback worked, and Microsoft even included a simple little game called Minesweeper that helped people learn how to use a mouse while secretly getting them hooked on gaming without them even realizing it. But it wasn't just about features. Windows 3.0 had the right timing. The PC market was exploding. People wanted computers at home, and Windows 3.0 made it feel accessible. It was the start of something big. Bill Gates and Microsoft were no longer just a software company. They were becoming a household name. 2 years later, in 1992, Windows 3.1 came along and introduced drag-and-drop icons. Instead of copying or transferring a file using complicated shortcuts, you could just drag a file from one folder to another with your mouse. It was a small change that made a massive difference. It also introduced TrueType fonts. So what you saw on your screen was actually what you got when you printed a document. People no longer had to guess how something would look on paper. For businesses and design professionals, that was a huge deal. Windows 95. It had the Start menu, the taskbar, the desktop layout that influenced almost every operating system that followed. If you've ever used a computer, you've used something that Windows 95 invented. Here's what was really happening behind the scenes. Windows 95 was still running on top of MS-DOS, but Microsoft had hidden that fact so well, most people never knew. They made it seem like a full operating system, and it worked. It looked clean. It felt polished. It was approachable in a way that previous versions never were. It also introduced plug and play. You plugged in a printer and the computer just recognized it. Before Windows 95, you had to manually install drivers. People don't realize how stressful that was. You'd buy a printer, bring it home, and then spend 3 hours trying to find a floppy disk with the right drivers. Windows 95 made that problem go away. Internet Explorer was included too, but it was unstable. People didn't really use it. It crashed constantly. The internet era was coming, but Windows 95 wasn't quite ready for it yet. The launch itself was a phenomenon. Microsoft spent $300 million on marketing. They used the Rolling Stones song, "Start Me Up." People lined up at midnight to buy software. Software. Can you imagine that today? Windows 98. It was a souped-up version of Windows 95, designed to integrate better with the internet. Internet Explorer was finally stable enough to use. People could browse the web without it crashing every 5 minutes. USB support was another big upgrade. Before Windows 98, computers had different ports for each device. Printers, mice, keyboards, scanners, all used different connectors. It was confusing. Windows 98 introduced standard USB support, meaning devices could finally use one connector. It made plugging things in so much easier. They also added dual monitor support. That was huge for gamers and professionals who needed more screen space. 2 monitors became possible. Windows could extend across both screens. For designers, developers, and anyone doing complex work, it was a game changer. But Windows 98 had a reputation. It was buggy, it crashed, it was unstable, and the most famous moment in its history wasn't a feature announcement or a sales milestone. It was the Bill Gates blue screen. During a live CNN demo, Bill Gates and his employee tried to plug in a scanner to show how plug-and-play worked. The computer blue-screened, on live television, in front of millions of people. It became one of the most embarrassing moments in tech history. But somehow, Microsoft survived it. They released Windows 98 Second Edition in 1999 to fix the biggest problems. It added internet connection sharing and better DVD support, but the damage was done. Windows 98 would always be remembered for that blue screen. Windows Me, also known as Windows Millennium Edition, also known as the Mistake Edition. You know your operating system has a problem when even PC World calls it the worst Windows version ever. And honestly, they weren't wrong. Windows Me was meant to be the multimedia-focused upgrade for home users. It introduced System Restore, which was actually a good idea. If something went wrong, your computer could go back to a previous state. But even System Restore didn't always work right. Movie Maker debuted here. Windows Media Player got updated, Autoplay made its first appearance. And for some reason, they removed Real Mode MSDOS to speed up boot times. That just broke compatibility with older programs. The problem was simple. Windows Me was unstable. Opening software made your computer lag. Sometimes it just crashed for no reason. It was unreliable in a way that frustrated everyone who used it. People joked that ME stood for Mistake Edition. Others said it stood for Memory Explosion. The nickname stuck. Windows 2000. While all of this was happening on the consumer side, Microsoft was building something else entirely. Something more secure, more stable, more powerful. It was called Windows 2000. It belonged to the Windows NT line, the business-focused branch that had been running on a completely different kernel since the early 90s. Windows 2000 was highly stable. Businesses loved it. It laid the foundation for everything that would come later. But it wasn't perfect. Microsoft billed it as the most secure Windows ever. They made claims about its reliability. And then it shipped with a bunch of security flaws. For a business-focused operating system, security was everything, and Windows 2000 didn't quite deliver. Windows XP. Microsoft unified their consumer and business lines. For the first time, everyone got the same rock-solid NT kernel. Home users got the stability that businesses had been enjoying for years. And the NTFS file system meant support for large hard drives. That was huge at a time when storage was growing rapidly. It looked modern too. The eye-pleasing Luna interface with its green, blue, and silver color schemes felt fresh. It was a massive improvement over the boxy, dated look of previous versions. The start menu evolved. The taskbar was cleaner. XP was fast. Startup times were much quicker than previous versions. Hardware detection worked better. You could plug in a device and Windows XP would actually handle it without crashing. Built-in CD burning made sharing files and music simple. XP was stable in a way that Windows 9X never was. It also came in multiple editions: Professional for businesses, Home for consumers, a 64-bit edition for powerful machines, a Media Center edition for home entertainment. But not everything was perfect. XP introduced product activation, an anti-piracy scheme that required users to activate their copy online or by phone. People hated it. They felt like Microsoft was treating them like criminals. It was a rocky start to a feature that would become standard. Yet despite the controversy, XP remained extremely popular. So popular that it stuck around for years. It was so good that even the release of an operating system people didn't really like couldn't kill it. Windows Vista. Microsoft wanted to modernize Windows. They wanted to patch security holes. They wanted to add features that would make the OS feel futuristic. They added Aero Glass, transparent windows that looked beautiful. Aero Flip, a 3D animation for switching between windows. User Account Control, or UAC, which was supposed to prevent malware from making unauthorized changes. But Vista had a problem, a big one. It was too heavy for the hardware people were using. That beautiful Aero interface consumed way too many resources. Computers lagged, performance suffered, and UAC appeared every time you tried to do anything. Do you want to install this program? Yes? Are you sure? Yes? Really sure? Yes. It was annoying. OEMs didn't help. They mismarketed low-end systems as Vista ready when they clearly weren't. People bought computers that claimed to run Vista and then found out they couldn't. Or they could, but it was painfully slow. Driver support was another nightmare. Hardware makers didn't update their drivers in time, so printers stopped working, scanners stopped working, gaming performance was terrible, and Vista had some of those odd DRM schemes that made everything feel locked down. It was the best-looking, most frustrating operating system anyone had ever used. People hated it, so much that they held onto Windows XP instead. Windows 7. This took all the good parts of Vista and removed the lag. The Aero Glass interface was still there. The visual polish was still there, but it ran smoothly. Windows 7 had performance that felt like XP. With the modern design of Vista, it introduced the search bar that instantly found apps, settings, and documents. If you forgot where a file was, you could just type its name and Windows 7 would find it. That was a massive productivity boost for everyone. Then there was Snap. You could drag a window to the side of the screen and it would automatically resize to half. Perfect for comparing files. Perfect for writing while reading something else. Perfect for anyone who had ever struggled to position windows manually. Taskbar previews let you hover over an icon and see what was open. Jump lists let you access recent files from the taskbar. It was clean. It was efficient. It just worked. Windows 7 became the most used operating system of its era. It held its own against its successor well into the late 2000s and 10s. Some editions were even supported through 2023. That's how much people loved it. Windows 8. October 26, 2012. Microsoft tried to turn desktop computers into giant tablets. They removed the classic Start menu and replaced it with a Start screen. A full-screen interface filled with live tiles that showed weather, calendar, news, and apps. It was designed for touch, for tablets, for the Surface devices Microsoft was pushing hard at the time. But people don't use desktop computers with their fingers. They use mice and keyboards. And using Windows 8 on a desktop was confusing. To see other software, you had to scroll horizontally to the right, horizontal scrolling, on a desktop computer. Nobody wanted that. The Metro apps were another problem. They were full screen. They didn't make sense for multitasking. They had limited functionality compared to traditional desktop programs. It wasn't that Windows 8 was technically bad. It was stable. It performed well. But Microsoft tried to force a tablet experience onto desktop users. Windows 8.1. October 17, 2013. Microsoft admitted they made a mistake. The Start button came back. Not the full Start menu, but a button that went to the Start screen. You could boot directly to the desktop instead of the Start screen. Little changes that made a huge difference. Miracast support arrived. 3D printer support arrived. The apps improved, but the damage was done. Windows 8 was remembered as the strange one, the weird one, the version that wanted to be a tablet and a desktop at the same time. And while 8.1 was better, it was too late. The reputation was already set. Windows 10. Microsoft made a bold claim. Windows 10 would be the final version of Windows. They would just keep updating it. Forever. No more new versions, just continuous improvements. Windows as a service. And Windows 10 was a mix of everything. It brought back the Start menu, but kept the tiles on the right. It was like Windows 7 and Windows 8 had a baby. It worked on desktops. It worked on tablets. It was the compromise everyone could live with. Virtual desktops arrived. Task View let you see everything that was open. The interface felt polished. But there were problems. Windows 10 forced updates. Your computer would restart at random times. Sometimes during a presentation. Sometimes while you were working. The update percentage would get stuck. The blue screen would stay there for hours. Microsoft was now in charge of your computer. You didn't own it anymore. You were renting it. They decided when to update. They decided what features to add. They decided what to remove. And people felt that loss of control. Windows 10 became the most used Windows version. But it came at a cost. Privacy, control. The feeling that your computer belonged to Microsoft a little more than it belonged to you. And then, in October 2025, Microsoft ended support for Windows 10. That last version claim? Turns out that was a lie. Windows 11. October 5th, 2021 to present. The start menu is centered. The taskbar is centered. It looks different, more streamlined, more like a Mac. Microsoft says it's about focus, about productivity, about simplicity. Snap layouts let you hover over the Maximize button and choose a window arrangement. Useful for presentations, useful for multitasking, a small quality of life improvement. File Explorer got tabs. You can organize files without opening multiple windows. It seems small, but it makes a difference when you're moving a lot of files. Under the hood, Windows 11 has stricter security requirements. TPM 2.0, secure boot. Many older computers couldn't upgrade. It was Microsoft's way of saying, buy a new PC, and people complained. The AI integration is deeper, but is it useful, or is it just another feature Microsoft wants to push? Time will tell. But here's the real problem. As of 2024, most people were still using Windows 10. Windows 11 looked nice. It felt modern, but it wasn't that different. Not different enough to force an upgrade. Not different enough to make people leave Windows 10. So Microsoft had to change their strategy. They started pushing Windows 11 harder, and in the process, they left behind the one version of Windows that people actually want. The one Microsoft doesn't want you to have. Here's the thing they don't tell you. There's another version of Windows. No ads, no bloatware, no forced Microsoft account, no store, no Xbox, no Edge, no Cortana, no widgets, no news, no weather, no sports, no photos, no camera, no music, no clock, nothing. Just Windows. Clean, fast, stable. Security updates for 10 years. No feature updates, no UI changes, no surprises. Just stability. It's called Windows LTSC. Long-term servicing channel. Microsoft built it for one purpose. Mission-critical devices, hospital equipment, ATM's air traffic control. You can't afford a restart in the middle of surgery. You can't afford a UI change that confuses a pilot. So Microsoft created LTSC, and they will do everything in their power to make sure you never install it on your personal computer. Here's why. Microsoft's business model depends on the consumer version of Windows. Ads. Microsoft 365 subscriptions, forced Microsoft accounts, data tracking, app suggestions, cloud storage. They monetize every click. LTSC breaks that model. No ads, no account required, no data collection. Just an operating system. And Microsoft can't make money off you if you're just using an operating system. So they hide it behind enterprise volume licensing. You can't buy it at Best Buy. You can't download it legally as an individual. You need a business contract. You need to jump through hoops. There is a great video on screen. Go watch it next, okay?